So let's drill down to the 4 things practices do to maximize cancer navigation revenues. First, they organize the staffing model to support navigation. And the 3 basic models that we have outlined, to some degree, there's a bit of overlap, but let's at least accept the basic concept that we consider navigation as either a dedicated task, as a distributed task, or using a distributed model, or as a hybrid model. Now, when I speak to colleagues about patient navigation, I often hear them say, well, we have a patient navigator and she does that or he does that. And so what they're really thinking about is a dedicated navigator in this example, which is a clinical or non-clinical person whose sole job is to perform patient navigation, to do those 10 things that you see on the CMS navigation domains. Their job is navigation. And they work as sort of an air traffic controller, if you will, sort of connecting all the touch points. So as you see at the right side of the slide, that they're communicating with the provider, the office staff, the other navigators, referring docs, financial counselors, social workers, family patients, and so forth. That's the role that they play. That's their dedicated job. And often, physicians tend to think of it being sort of an other person's job. The navigator does that, but you see how, and perhaps you're already learning that's not necessarily how it needs to be or how it should be. But in this initial model, which is a model that many of us may be familiar with, there's a dedicated role, and this person provides continuity across the helps with transitions from one specialty to another. And this role, which is quite valuable, has often been historically been non-revenue generating, which is why they're so precious and there's so few of them, because they've been dedicated navigators are generally considered to be overhead that you don't get paid for, although they bring tremendous value to patients and to the institution. So that's the dedicated navigator model. But let's look at the distributed navigation team, which is kind of what most of us have experienced or do in a practice, especially if we're in private practice. In this scenario, everyone plays a role in navigation. They're not necessarily a dedicated navigator, so you don't see them represented on this slide, but each member provides some sort of navigation in their existing role, whether they're the provider, the front desk, the medical assistant, the nurse, the billing department. They all play a role in navigation. Frankly, many offices can't afford a dedicated navigator, at least up until now, they have not been able to afford it, but perhaps now they can. But the benefit is that by sort of dividing the work across the team, we can spread the navigation workload and also ensure that every patient gets consistent help at every point in the interaction. The main limitation of this is that without structure, the care can be quite fragmented. Some patients get some level of care, others patients may miss it. There's no point person, which limits the amount of accountability there is for something that doesn't happen. And of course, there's a potential for more things to fall between the cracks. So we consider this as obviously a model that is commonly used, but a model that has some significant limitations, especially if you don't have a structure or a platform that allows you to organize the process. And the third model I want to mention is the hybrid navigation team, which basically makes everyone a navigator, including the provider, but also involves a dedicated navigator. This is the model. The basic model is a primary dedicated navigator, which I would identify as this individual, plus a navigation certified office staff, which is here, supported and led, of course, by the provider. The benefits here is scalability. It ensures every patient gets baseline level of navigation, with also the ability to focus the navigator on patients that require more care, more resources. The dedicated navigator serves as a point of contact, a point person who has oversight into all patients. And what's most important, or at least in the context of revenue generation, what's most important about this model is that every category is a revenue stream. You can capture the revenue for the work of the physician who communicates with various people in his or her role. You can capture the revenue for the work of the auxiliary personnel who, like the navigator, communicates with a broad range of people. And of course, if you have the dedicated navigator here, they would do the same. And all of them are a source of not only quality and value for the patient, but revenue for your practice. Now, I mentioned earlier that certification is required for auxiliary personnel. This is just an example of one of the certification programs available. Of course, you can have a nurse who's already an oncology nurse and she doesn't require any additional qualifications. But for many practices that are sort of expanding the role of navigation in their practices, they're working with people that have not been trained as navigators. So the American Cancer Society has tried to make the process of navigation education easier by establishing an online self-paced course that includes an exam that your staff can take online. It costs about $500 per person to take it. It's an 18-hour course that they can take over a 3-month time period. And it requires a high school diploma or GED, but it doesn't require any other specialty license. So basically, anyone in your staff can become a certified navigator, which qualifies them as staff for which you can whose time can be captured for billing. And so the main goal is to ensure that all staff meet the all specifically auxiliary personnel meet the criteria for principal in this navigation billing. And that's what this certificate does. Practically speaking, if you're starting off with this navigation process, well, we would suggest you choose, 1 or 2 people to lead the process as you build up your navigator program. And then as your services expand, you can add additional staff so that ultimately perhaps your entire staff will have qualifications as a navigator. It's also important to know that certification is not required. This certification is not required for MDs, PAs, or nurse practitioner. Your license, your medical license, PA license qualifies you to do certain navigation tasks, which you routinely perform, but you don't have to get an additional certification in order to bill for the PCM codes. This relates to billing for the PIN code, the Principal Illness Navigation Code.